Dear listeners, welcome to Faces of Digital Health, a podcast about digital health and how healthcare systems adopt technologies. I am your host, Tjasa Zajc, and this is the third part of a special series about digital therapeutics. In the first episode, you could listen to Jessica Schul, the European lead for Digital Therapeutic Alliance, explain the basics of DTx, what they are, and how does an app qualify as a digital therapeutic.
In 2010, there was this realization that not only could an intervention happen just by communication, but the actual software itself could be the intervention. And so the companies that were working on this, I think, were doing groundbreaking work, and it took a lot of their innovation and pioneering to get us where we are now.
In the second episode, Paul Sims from i4Pharma talked about the current state of the pharma industry and the relationship between the pharma industry and DTx.
It's true that drug treatments are insufficient for most chronic diseases. We have to treat the whole patient. We have to look beyond simply the clinical improvement of a patient in order for them to truly manage and own their own health. Health systems are obviously struggling to manage the rising costs of managing disease, and indeed, with a digital therapeutic approach, with that sense of self-ownership, we could take a more preventative approach to disease, and that indeed is far cheaper and far smarter than the current curative models that we try to deploy.
We've got 3 more episodes to go in this DTx series, and you're going to hear about different examples of DTx from different parts of the world. In this episode, you will hear from Jamie Moore, who is a general manager and Daybreak co-founder of a Daybreak program at the Australian organisation Hello Sunday Morning. Hello Sunday Morning has a mission to change the world's relationship with alcohol. Their program is already reimbursed in Australia, and with the rise of DTx recognition around the world, Daybreak could soon be reimbursed in other countries as well. In this episode, Jamie talked about the early days of Hello Sunday Morning, the drinking culture in Australia, the meaning of community support in tackling alcohol addiction, and the current impact of the COVID crisis on alcohol consumption. When Hello Sunday Morning was founded over 10 years ago, the emphasis was on binge drinking. But by today, the user structure has changed, and Daybreak members are predominantly dependent drinkers. They are very much on the heavy end of drinking, with 40 plus drinks per week. Some users are moderate drinkers. Enjoy the discussion or read the recap of the show on our website www.facesofdigitalhealth.com. The link to the summary of this episode can be found in the show notes. Also, in the next 2 episodes, you will be able to listen about 2 other DTx companies. Kaya Health, which was founded in Germany and is now active in the US. Kaya Health is tackling chronic pain management and soon COPD. Another company you will get to know is Wealthy Therapeutics, one of Asia's leading digital therapeutics. So subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. Now to Hello Sunday Morning with Jamie Moore, who has a first-class honors in psychology and started his master's in organizational psychology but dropped out to focus on building software to address the issue of high-risk drinking. Hello, Jamie. Tell me, how are you doing in these days where the whole world is self-isolating? How is Australia on that front?
I'm doing okay, and my family is doing okay. Australia, it's getting weird. I'm not going to lie. I even went out this morning to get a coffee, and you're still allowed to do that. And I had a discussion with the barista, and things are getting weird. Like, couple of days ago, or even I think yesterday, our Prime Minister announced that social gatherings are now limited to 2 people in public, and really we're just being told not to leave the house unless you're getting groceries or essentials, and they haven't done a formal ban of going outside yet, but it's something I think people are very anxious about and think is coming.
Which brings us to the question related to Hello Sunday Morning. So Hello Sunday Morning is an organization based in Sydney, and you have a mission to change the world's relationship with alcohol. Alcohol, besides coffee, is a socially very acceptable drug, and I'm sure that in these weird, unusual times, many people search a little bit of distressing or relief in that. Are you noticing any of those trends?
Those trends around increased drinking are being seen in Australia already, and I believe are being seen around the world. So that we saw the World Health Organisation came out a couple of days ago, sort of letting people know that drinking copious amounts of alcohol is really not going to be an effective long-term coping mechanism for periods of social isolation. There's been many interviews and news stories in Australia written about this already. Young people in particular had sort of been telling the media that alcohol was sort of this social lubricant in society for them, but now it's really becoming a necessity to get them through the day in their households. So we are really concerned about what's happening already, but if this is going to go on for 6 to 12 months, it's going to end up having a huge impact on the health system, because we're going to see people going to hospital and emergency departments because of alcohol in a time we want people to be healthier than ever, and we want people to be avoiding those preventable hospitalizations. So yeah, we're really concerned, and something we can talk about more.
Did you say that young people are the most problematic, it seems?
The data is showing in Australia that the drinking of young people has actually been decreasing over, say, the last 10 years. And the drinking amongst older populations, sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, is actually increasing. And that data also supports the type of person that signs up to our program as well. So a lot of people think, young people and binge drinking, that's the problem we have in society. And while it is an issue, we see heavy drinking across the spectrum, even people in their 60s and 70s. So while some of the media articles in Australia around COVID have been around young people and their drinking, I don't think we can just point the finger at young people. Like we've seen alcohol, purchasing and hoarding all across the age spectrum so far.
Because I would expect that there's various aspects to this. So in one case, you've got people that are suddenly isolated and completely alone. And then on the other hand, you've got families perhaps in cramped apartments or in bad relationships, which can all be reasons contributing to higher alcohol consumption.
People use alcohol even before this for a reason, right? So you might drink to relax, you might drink to sort of feel more confident, or you might drink to deal with feelings of anxiety that you have. So, if you're a person who drinks because of anxiety or to escape, that potentially is only going to get worse in the current situation if we can't get people help. And, you sort of, the things you raised around domestic violence and the other issues that come from that, like there's been anecdotal evidence coming out of China that households that didn't have issues of alcohol consumption and domestic violence previously had them during the lockdowns and during these periods of social isolation. So it's something we need to be aware of.
Well, let's go a step back and talk a little bit about Hello Sunday Morning. How did it begin? It's over a decade-old organization. What do you actually do, in your words?
We've been around since 2010. So we have sort of an interesting story in that our founder was actually a nightclub promoter. And as a young man in high school, he tells me he used to bootleg alcohol into his sort of dormitory. So he had a really interesting relationship with alcohol himself. So he was working as a nightclub promoter, as I said, and also in marketing. And the marketing company he was working for won a contract to deliver a binge drinking campaign for the government. And so the campaign that he came up with as a 22-year-old was really the type of thing we've seen before, one of those sort of scare-based drinking campaigns with maybe the young man getting in a fight or the young woman in the bushes vomiting. But he realized that wasn't going to change his behavior. So he figured, well, you know what, I'm going to figure out actually what would change the way I drank and what is my relationship with alcohol. So he took 12 months off drinking and he actually started a blog, And every Sunday morning, he released that blog around what it was like for a 22-year-old to sort of step out of the drinking culture for a while. And he called it Hello Sunday Morning. And what happened was that got a lot of media traction and a lot of interest from the community. And then slowly towards the end of that year, some of his friends and people he knew said, I want to jump on and do 3 months of no drinking or cutting back on drinking as well. And I want to blog about it too. And really that was where the Hello Sunday Morning community began. And, today we've had over 200,000 people have a similar experience in one of our products.
So tell me a little bit more about how the community grew in the past up until today, and what kind of support do you offer?
Yeah, it's really changed over the years. So initially in 2010, if you remember back to then, blogging was still maybe relatively new and relatively cool. So we had just a basic WordPress website that we built that enabled people to sign up, choose if they wanted to do 3 or 12 months, choose if they wanted to not drink or cut back on their drinking. And literally they would just write what they were feeling in an incredibly authentic way about what they were going through, the challenges they faced, the good things that came from it. And because of the experience that Chris, our co-founder, had and been so honest in his journey, the honesty and the authenticity around the writing was just like nothing we'd ever seen. And so people would post and then they could choose to share that externally if they wanted to, but mostly people in the community would comment. And we started building this forum where there was thousands of people supporting one another. So that did just start as, peer support, if you want to frame it that way. And what happened over the years is in, say, 2014, we had a look at the data and we saw that at the beginning, the majority of people signing up were like young people in their early 20s, late 20s, talking about binge drinking, and this sort of experience was like a social experiment for them. But as we'd gone ahead 4 years, slowly what was happening was people signing up were getting older. So they were 30, 40, 50, and the drinking was very different. So it wasn't this weekend binge drinking anymore. It was people who are really struggling with alcohol as this daily thing in their lives. And we looked at their writing and it was like, wow, these are people that really maybe would use something like AA or maybe even need, their doctor or some other type of face-to-face support. And that's where we pivoted and we realized that what we were offering at that time, while really engaging, needed more clinical evidence behind it. And that made us go towards the journey of the Daybreak program.
You offer a program called Daybreak, which helps people change their relationships with alcohol through supportive community, habit change experiments, one-on-one chats with health coaches. Can you tell me a little bit more about the clinical evidence or clinical trials or just tracking of data and findings that you came up with through this app?
So it's a personalized online program, accessible on mobile app or through web platforms. Many of our users we've found actually don't want to download apps. They're in the sort of older bracket that may be a bit untrustworthy of apps, so prefer to go through a website. And it does. So it provides supportive and moderated online community, provides access to evidence-informed experiments, and also it provides access to one-on-one health coaches. And so the health coaches are actually psychologists or counsellors, so they're trained and accredited. So in terms of, I guess, the evidence, before I jump there, if you think about the innovation in what we've done in Daybreak, and this does lead to the evidence, it's not innovative because it's an app. Like there's lots of health apps out there and you can build on really quickly if you want to. What's innovative about what we've done is previously it had been thought that supporting really heavy drinkers, people that are probably dependent on alcohol, doing that online could not be done safely and could not be done effectively. So where we've been innovative with Daybreak is we've found a way to do that online. So it means we can support thousands and thousands of people every day, every week, where a normal face-to-face service just wouldn't be possible. And we can do that in an effective and safe way.
How do you manage that? Is there a lot of member-to-member support? Before you mentioned blogging, and I wonder if today when people are overburdened with digital stimuli and where when attention span is shortening, 30-second videos, 15-second videos is what you can expect people to see with interest on social media. So I'm wondering, to which extent are people open to writing about their experiences in a long format, or really taking time to listen to someone else's problems if that's not their professional duty?
And really that's a major change we've made in Daybreak from our past programs. So the original platforms were blogging, long form platforms, but in Daybreak we actually significantly shortened that. So it's definitely not social media. That's not what Daybreak offers people. It's an opportunity for them to share. So they share a post, and there's actually a character limit on that. So it's not a long form thing. It's more of a brief thing. It's quite a large character limit, so they can talk in quite great detail. And then the key to it is not just them sharing how they're feeling, but us getting them reactions from the community as quickly as possible. So what we find is somebody signs up to the program, we support them to post their first share to the community, and our real goal is to get them a response to that share, not from us, but from another peer member within 5 minutes. And what that shows them is, wow, there's this community here that I've come to, been really authentic around what I'm feeling, and I've received immediate empathy and support from other people going through the same thing. And that's what they're looking for, because often in their personal life, that's not there. You would think that when you make a decision to cut back or quit drinking because it's a problem for you, your friends and family would be your number one supporters. But we've had stories of, women saying they've joined Daybreak, told their mothers, and their mothers have said, why are you doing this to me? Drinking together is what we do. Is there some issue with our relationship? Rather than saying to them, well done, I'm here to support you.
Which just indicates how big the whole problem about the alcohol in society and the attitude that we have towards it is. I was actually surprised when I was looking at some statistics from the World Health Organization, which showed that alcohol consumption is higher in Europe or Eastern Europe, Russia, than it is in Australia. Yet Australia is very famous for binge drinking.
I believe we have a little bit of a reputation for being people that can't stop once we get started when it comes to drinking. I mean, my experiences living overseas probably showed me that the way I drank was a little bit different.
In what way?
I think the amounts in single sittings. So, when Australians drink, many Australians, and not all Australians, it's not one or two to sit down and have a chat. It's sort of 10, 15, 20 to really, as we'd say, get amongst it and have a big night. And that's really acceptable behaviour, not just amongst young people, but amongst older drinkers as well. And I found I lived in the US in my early 20s, and when I was at college there, and even in a college environment, I could see that, the levels of consumption I would have on the days that I drank, people wow, that's a lot of alcohol. And that was totally normal for my friendship group back home. So I think that's the reputation that we have as a country, and one that it is slowly changing, but you really notice it when you look overseas.
Given the age of your organization, did you manage to change any of that perception, or you got some attention from the government? So how are you influencing the whole culture?
Culture change is an incredibly difficult thing, we've learnt. So our mission is around changing the world's relationship with alcohol, and that word relationship is really important because different people can drink in different ways. So as much as possible, we try and not tell people how to drink or how much to drink, but you sort of know yourself, if you're drinking too much or if your relationship with alcohol isn't great. And in the early days, we used to do a lot of marketing campaigns around the drinking culture and the binge drinking culture and those types of things, but it was just so difficult to measure our impact. And you would see shifts in drinking, especially in alcohol, consumption levels. Unfortunately, in Australia, the risks and the damage of alcohol are still rising. So we're seeing less drinking, but maybe more dangerous drinking. But we just couldn't pinpoint, this thing we did caused this change in the culture, because culture is kind of everything, and so many things contribute to it. So now we're much more focused on how are we changing the drinking and how are we improving the mental health and the productivity of an individual person through our program, which we can then say has an impact on the wider drinking culture that we have.
So let's talk a little bit more about your program. If I'm not mistaken, you are qualified as a digital therapeutic, which means that your digital solution has clinical evidence of its efficacy. So what kind of results did you measure so far?
We are a member of the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, so I believe you have a pretty good understanding of, and maybe are speaking to some others about. Megan Coder, who runs the Alliance, they would refer to Daybreak as an aspiring digital therapeutic. So we're certainly not a regulated, fully approved digital therapeutic as yet. So where we're at is really there's sort of 4 key stages. So, one, patient satisfaction and engagement, in which we're incredibly strong. We've had close to 100,000 people use and download the platform. You can see our ratings on the App Store and the engagement levels off the charts compared to traditional support services. In terms of clinical effectiveness, so we've run a study with a university in Australia and had some really great outcomes. So it shows that engagement with Daybreak significantly reduces alcohol consumption for 2 groups. So one group is this group of probably dependent drinkers that I spoke about. So these are people having 40 plus drinks per week. And it's been shown that Daybreak supports a reduction in that down to 20 drinks a week. So that's still more than the World Health Organization would recommend, but 20 is a much safer level than the 40 plus that they were at. And the second group is what you would term harmful alcohol users. So these are people having the sort of 20 to 30 drinks a week, and the use of Daybreak's bringing that down to anywhere from 10 to 12 drinks a week, which is definitely in that low risk safe range that the World Health Organization would talk about.
Your program also consists of techniques such as mindfulness. Do you think this model could be transferable to other addictions as well? Has anyone thought of that? Is that not in your focus? Is there any other companies that are trying to do what you're doing? Just
the question about other addictions and our technology and software's capability there is something we get asked every single week. Where our organisation is really focused is on alcohol as an issue. So Daybreak at the moment is supporting a group of people around the world with a particular, issue around drinking and a need that Daybreak can help them solve. So that's the need for immediate access to a peer community and immediate access to a professional that they can chat with to get trusted advice. I guess where we're at is, while the software could be used for other addictions like marijuana, pharmaceutical, drugs, even non-substance addictions, we're probably more interested in what other pieces of technology can we build that help other aspects of the alcohol treatment sector. So we know that internationally, wait lists for rehab and face-to-face services are a big problem. And we also know that relapse is a big problem once you leave one of those services. So there's definitely capacity for us to build other programs that sort of help other populations in the alcohol space. And I think we'll probably leave it to our other trusted friends in the Digital Therapeutics Alliance to focus on the other substance addictions for now.
I'm assuming you are also running campaigns are promoting less drinking or for people to choose to abstain from drinking. Did you ever face any issues from the industry side because of that?
Yeah, so we have run in the past, campaigns around the drinking culture and, reducing your drinking, most definitely. These days, most of our campaigns actually promote individuals that have had success using the program. We actually find that's much more effective for people to share their personal story around using Daybreak, the impact that's had on their life, how they drink now or if they don't drink and what that means for their, mental health and their productivity. In terms of the industry, it's such a fascinating question because in Australia, the sort of public health sector, so organisations like ourselves that, promote, reductions in obesity and drinking and smoking, and the industry, say the alcohol industry, the relationship isn't the healthiest, which I know is a little different in other countries. Like I've heard in Canada, the public health and the alcohol industry work a little bit better together. We think personally that the alcohol industry has a really strong part to play in helping people drink at healthier levels. Like for them, having someone who drinks at lower risk levels for a longer period of time is probably a better customer than someone who drinks very heavily and dangerously for a shorter period of time and causes damage to society. And also then government comes in and wants to regulate alcohol the way they have with smoking. So while we've had, good conversations, I guess, with the alcohol industry about what we do, and they're very clear that our goal isn't to make the world abstain. Like our goal is to help people drink in a safer way. They don't support us financially, and I wouldn't say they're big supporters of our work.
Do members use your platform only for a shorter period of time, or is it that once they start using the platform that they become long-term users? And what are the trends now in these sensitive times?
I guess we're in this interesting position as an app where we don't want people to use us for a long time. Like we want people to come and have an experience with us, get the support they need, and then address their issue and be drinking less. So to that effect, we're sort of different than Uber, right? Who want you using their app every single day forever. And we have members regularly that write to us and say, I've been using your platform for a year. I'm doing great now. Thank you so much. Like, can you please delete my profile because I want to move on from the past me? So while that looks terrible for our engagement metrics, it's a fantastic outcome for that individual. So if we look at how our users and members access the program, it's very different. So some use it every day, some might use it weekly, some might check in monthly. But really we try and get people to stick with the program for anywhere from sort of 8 to 16 weeks. And that's when we start to see the positive changes. But some people come in for a briefer amount of time and that's all they need. Some people have been on the platform for many, many years and they use it as a way of maintaining their sobriety or maintaining what they have achieved. So here what's important is more the comparison to other services. So if you look at our engagement and retention rates, they would be higher than what you would see in a face-to-face service. But if you compared our rates to another non-health related app, they might look really poor. So the comparison there is important.
Are users anonymous?
This is one of the really great things about our program, and then also one of the really difficult things. So maintaining anonymity is incredibly important for people in our program, because people that use Daybreak are just everyday people. There's people that might be CEOs of really large companies. They could be sports stars. They could be a mother with 3 children that lives next door. They're just everyday people that struggle with this problem. And there's so much shame and stigma around drinking, and particularly wanting to reduce how much you drink. People aren't public with that yet. And they don't want other people to know about it. That's why we have things like AA. So in Daybreak, we really recommend that people stay anonymous and they don't share personal details and use their real name. But in the back end, we do have their personal information, which we ask for. And we do that because we need to maintain the safety and the security for the member. Sort of going back to the point that I'd made earlier around our innovation being we can support these people online in a safe way, which previously wasn't thought possible, means that if we need to intervene with an individual, so we have a whole team of clinicians and moderators in the back end that a member wouldn't even see, we can do so in a safe way to get them support in a crisis if they need it, or to sort of help them access other services if they need them as well. So it's a really delicate balance of maintaining someone's anonymity and privacy and sort of their right to go through this program the way they want to, but also making sure that we take care of them when they need someone to take care of them.
How often does that happen, that you have to intervene?
In a clinical risk setting, very, very seldom, maybe once a month, do we have to intervene, around issues of suicidal ideation or alcohol withdrawal or something like that. It's not too often we need to do that. Where we do intervene often is around what we would call a breach of the community guidelines. So the way we've built Daybreak and sort of moving into the more science and the technology behind it here, there's like deliberate design decisions that we've made that reduce significantly incidents of bullying and trolling and some of those problems you see in online communities. So what it means is we don't really have many of those issues at all. And if we do, that's when we intervene and we let people know that, that's a breach of guidelines. But often before we even do that, the community of peers are doing that themselves. So if somebody leaves a comment on someone's share that just really isn't helpful or is maybe rude or a little insulting, often before we've even seen it, the peer community are stepping in and letting people know, that's not acceptable in this community and this is why we're here. And other reasons we may step in is, someone might share their personal email or their phone number or something like that. And we'll get in touch with them and ask them to remove that for their own safety. But the clinical risk we manage really well in a population of people that are at, much higher risk for a lot of, health and crisis issues.
I got stuck on the word that you used, and that is acceptable. I think in many situations, and your members also often talk about social expectations to drink. So I would say it often seems unacceptable, that you don't drink at a wedding, if you go for an after work drink, for a hands night or similar occasions. Do you have any advice as, how can people just get the courage or the strength to avoid drinking when they really don't want to, but they are almost forced into it because of the peer pressure?
The cultural pressure around, drinking at those events is just ridiculous sometimes, isn't it? Like the thought of, not drinking at a wedding, the look that people would give you, they would think you're a crazy person. Like I remember many years ago, a good friend of mine was starting a new job, or he'd maybe been there a month, and I had asked him how he was going and what the drinking culture was like, because that's something I'm obviously really interested in. And he said there was a lot of heavy drinking, and the expectation was that you went to these events after work and you drank. And I think he was actually struggling with it a fair bit. So I asked him, why he just why just not drink at the event or not go? And he said, well, I don't want to be the new guy that isn't getting involved and, seen as doesn't want to be having fun. So it's actually, in his mind, going to impact his career if he didn't drink, which is just like a horrible thing for someone to go through. So the things that we suggest to people, like they do come down to the individual, and we have coaches in Hello Sunday Morning, in Daybreak, counsellors and psychologists that can chat to members one-on-one around this. One thing that works for a lot of people is not just having, if you're out at a drinking event, a glass of water, like maybe asking for a sparkling water in a glass that looks like it's an alcoholic drink, putting some lime in it. Often that will remove the question, oh, you're not drinking. Other things we suggest to people are, finding a couple of trusted people in the group that you can lean on and sort of let them know what you're aiming to do and why you're not drinking. And they can sort of be your backup on the night for when you get the inevitable question of, oh, why aren't you drinking? Like, what's going on? And instead of you having to explain yourself over and over, you can have a couple of trusted people there that can sort of step in and back you up. But the communication around it is key. And sometimes the suggestion to people in the early days is, maybe you just can't go. Like maybe for the first couple of weeks, not going to those after work drinks or not attending that wedding is the best decision for you if alcohol is really getting in the way of your life, which is really sad that we wouldn't support each other around this. Like if you were trying to lose weight and you told people that, everyone would be your biggest cheer squad. But for some reason with alcohol, it's just not the case.
Cocktails, for example, they have quite a lot of calories. So that might be an excuse that people would support. But I think it's so misfortunate that we actually need to look for excuses if we don't want to drink. I know that one that I often use if I feel pressured into drinking is just saying that I'm on medications that require you to abstain from alcohol. And it's interesting to observe the reaction that people have. Suddenly they go like, oh yeah, I get that.
What I've observed, it's actually about trust. So if I'm, say, at a pub and I drink, so if I'm at a pub and someone asks me, what do you do for work? if I tell them about what I do for work and I don't have a drink in my hand, I literally see the way they look at me as I'm judging them, or I don't understand, or I can't be trusted. But if I have a beer in my hand, like, the level of engagement they have in the conversation and interest is 100x. You know, it's like they're saying, oh, you get it. Great, you drink. Like, I can trust you and you understand. So it's just such a fascinating dynamic that we have in the world around alcohol as this, you know, dangerous drug. Like, it is a dangerous drug, and that's accepted by many, many people. But it's legal and it's readily available. So it's just so hard for so many people when they want to cut back on it.
Are you currently only present in Australia?
No, so we're actually international. So the Daybreak program is accessed in Australia predominantly, and then we have large user base in the US, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Ireland. Like, really, people all over the world use the platform. But Australia at the moment is the only country we have reimbursement status in. So what that means is, in Australia, the program is free for around 8,000 people a year, and we're working with the government to try and increase that number. Really, the demand is anywhere from sort of 30 to 40,000 people a year, so we've got a long way to go to increase our reimbursement. Overseas, we don't have reimbursement yet, so what that means is members have to pay out of their own pocket to access the program on a monthly or an annual subscription. But it's not a model that will scale the program, and frankly isn't a model that's fair for people. Like, this should be a service, as an effective health service that's made available free through either government or private health insurance. So that's sort of a focus of ours over the next couple of years.
How did you manage to get reimbursement in the first place, and what kind of challenges are you facing in this regard? I can imagine that some insurance on markets with private insurance would see that as a potential reason to increase a premium or something. So people would be afraid to take upon such a program through an insurance.
Yeah, so in Australia, we achieved reimbursement through the federal government. So over here, how it started is we achieved reimbursement in sort of certain pockets of Australia. So the country, you know, briefly and boring, is split into these 31 health regions. And so we had 15 of the health regions paying for Daybreak in their area. And we used that to have a conversation with the Federal Health Minister, Greg Hunt, in Australia, who then provided reimbursement nationally for the program. And that's sort of rolling until at least the end of this year, and potentially for the next 3 or 4 years. In Australia, we have community rating on private health. So it actually means a health insurer can't charge you more in Australia if you have an issue around alcohol per se. But my understanding is that is different in other markets, particularly maybe even in the US. So that could be a problem if we went through the private market, people having to sort of admit that alcohol is a problem and they needed help around it. So that's one of the, I guess, issues that we have. But probably the main issue, like, and this is in Australia and overseas, is that there isn't a really clear mechanism for reimbursement for digital therapeutics. And, you know, this is something the Digital Therapeutics Alliance is working really heavily on. So we could say, go to Canada and say, hey, you have 30,000 people that could benefit from this program easily each year. But how we would go about getting into a funding model is really, really difficult and unclear, even if we have all the clinical evidence, economic evidence, all the safety and accreditation evidence to show that the program works. So this is something that around the world, you know, we need the health system reimbursement to catch up to what technology is capable of and what patients want.
So what kind of barriers to market are you facing when trying to enter other markets?
Yeah, so in markets overseas, our main, I guess, barrier right now, in terms of people accessing the program, there's no issues. Like, we're on the App Store and they can download and access the program. They just have to pay themselves. Probably our main barrier is like resource and time. So we're really at the moment heavily focused on Australia and increasing our reimbursement level from that 8,000 people a year up to sort of 30,000, 40,000 people a year. Once we have that in place, we'll just have more time to go to markets like the US, Canada, and begin those conversations. So before everything happened with COVID, I'd actually been planning a trip to Canada in March to meet with some really senior health officials from Health Canada and some people from the provinces and other people in the alcohol treatment space to begin those conversations. Some of that obviously is on hold with the travel restrictions, but right now, like, a message for government is that more than ever, like, giving your residents access to online services that can help them with their drinking is paramount. Like, we know that AA groups are closing. We know hospitals are closing, rehabs are closing. That doesn't mean you're not going to have a bunch of people, thousands of people that need help with this problem. So we'll be reaching out to sort of governments all around the world via email and video call as soon as we have time to.
So kind of ironically, is this crisis a little bit of an opportunity for you?
Yeah, I mean, for digital health overall, like, this is really digital health's time to help. Like, most digital health companies like us are really privileged in that our services haven't had to shut down. Our people can keep working. So we're privileged to be able to help thousands of people. And we're doing everything we can in Australia right now to do that. In respect to the advancement of technology, it's definitely an opportunity. Like, what we've seen in crises and big events like this in human civilization, whether it's world wars or other health issues, is the speed of adoption of new technology goes up incredibly. So in Australia, we've seen services that have been operating face-to-face for 100 years being forced to go online or forced to go onto telephone. And we're talking to them and we're asking them how it's going. And they're saying, you know what? Actually, our clients love it and our clinicians love it. It kind of makes us wonder why we see people face-to-face so much. So you can see by being forced to move into the new world and adopt new technology, people are realizing the benefit that digital health companies have been telling them for a decade they can realize. So definitely an opportunity, but more so, like, any digital health company, like, you are privileged right now to be able to help. So just do everything that you can.
The world is definitely going to be different after this crisis is over in terms of consumer habits. But it does seem that it's going to take a while before all this is over. So any last thoughts, words, encouraging advice that you might have in regards to drinking in this time?
I think my advice is, if you feel like you are increasing the amount you're drinking, or as we're seeing people starting to drink earlier in the day than they usually would, like, please reach out to somebody either a friend. Like, I guarantee you'll have someone that can jump on a Zoom call with you and talk about something that has nothing to do with COVID. If you can't do that, like, reach out to a professional network. Like, I know in Australia, there's COVID hotlines that have been set up. They'll be able to direct you to a service that can help. And if you're overseas, search for something like Daybreak or search for another online solution that can support you, because they're out there and they work and they're accessible. So just don't feel like you're in this alone. Like, it's actually a really strange occurrence for me as a 32-year-old, in that it probably doesn't matter who I speak to in the world right now. Like, we're all in the same position. So just know that.
You've been listening to Faces of Digital Health. Coming up next, tackling chronic pain with Kaya Health. If you want to know more about other episodes in this series, go to www.facesofdigitalhealth.com. If you like these shows, do leave a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps spread the word and help those interested in digital health find the show as well. Thank you.